Hi, welcome back. Have you ever tried drawing the texture of a plastic stretched over the skin? In this video, I will show you the step-by-step process of drawing this realistic portrait of a man with a shiny plastic bag over his head. It's going to be a detailed process, so let's get started. As always, these are the art supplies I'm going to use for this drawing, and you can pause the video right here to note them down. I'm using this premium 350 GSM paper by Grupo Ordinance, which was imported from Belgium, and the drawing portion area is 8 x 12 inches. But the surface of this drawing paper is quite similar to the ordinary chart paper or any other smooth surface drawing pad or Bristol pad, so you can use whichever is available. And before moving on to the grid making process, let's mask the edges of this drawing paper using a masking tape to prevent graphite from spilling over the borders. Okay, so in this drawing, I decided to experiment with incorporating both the outlining and shading simultaneously. The main reason for this approach is that as you move towards the bottom of the drawing, the outlines naturally fade away. And this fading can make it challenging to follow the directional lines and continue the shading effectively. And secondly, this whole drawing is a bit blurry and dark, so there are no actual outlines to draw. So to address this, I decided to divide the whole drawing portion in two parts. First, I'm tracing the outline and I will focus on the detailing of the upper portion. And once that is complete, I will move on to the bottom section. This method allows for more precision and control throughout the process. Okay, so as always, I've started my outline from the top left side and adding these small lines and strokes to mimic the eye. And as the reference image has some bright highlights on the polythene, so I'm cleaning the spill of the graphite from these small portions. And now I'm using my nail art dotting tool to add indentation lines in the area of brighter highlights. And make sure to add these indentation lines very carefully because you cannot reverse this process. And by the way, you can get access to our premium content and support this channel through Patreon. You can sign up through different membership levels and get access to all the outlines and grid references, etc. We have an ever-growing library of hundreds of exclusive and real-time tutorials. And you will also get access to 4 new tutorials every month. You can also post your artworks in our active community of patrons and participate in our weekly critique sessions where I give my honest and positive critiques on your artworks, so you can improve your skills and get better with your drawing. Visit the link in description and become a premium member today. It has always been my goal to provide free tutorials and information on drawing and art-related tools to general public. And keeping with that theme, I would like to thank all these incredible individuals who backed our channel on Patreon last month. Their generous support enabled me to produce this free tutorial for all of you guys. Now moving on to the right side, and I'm following the similar process of adding the strokes for the creases of the polythene as well as defining the shape of the eye. You can always use the grid outline image which I provided on Patreon profile to trace down the outline very easily onto your paper. It will help you minimize any possible mistakes as you can clearly see all the strokes in each grid box in a simplified form. Okay, so now the outline of the upper portion is done. Let's start the shading process, and I'm using my 8B pencil. As you can see in the reference image that this side is relatively darker than the right side. So I'm following the pressure technique to add a base layer. I'm using higher pressure while working on the shadowed portions and then gradually decreasing it while moving towards the lighter areas. And in this way, you will achieve a perfect gradient for darker to lighter tones using one pencil. Keep on adding this darker base layer in this whole upper portion. Okay, so now it's time to make this layer more saturated, and for that, I'm adding another layer of 8B graphite powder over it. If you don't have a graphite powder kit, you can make one at home by watching this video from the cards. Notice that I'm using my medium-sized dry brush and carefully layering more powder over these darker areas. And I'm using very less amount over the lighter areas to achieve the required 3D base. Make sure to use small circular motions while adding base layer to avoid patchiness. And when the intricate portions are done, you can switch towards the bigger sized dry brush and add the base layer in bigger sections. As the right side is slightly lighter, so I'm switching my 8B powder with an HB powder for this whole portion. Keep on layering the graphite until you have achieved the required base. Okay, so now it's time to redefine some contours and directional lines, and for that I'm again using my 8B pencil and shading the shadowed portions. Notice that I'm keeping the angle on my pencil very low and applying variable pressure to achieve the required depth. Just like this. I'm also adding some directional lines for the eyebrow hair. I'm following the similar process to shade the right portion as I did earlier. Okay, now it's time to blend the whole upper portion, and I'm using soft tissue paper and going over it in small circular motions. And look how smooth and blended the area has started to look, just like the way I wanted here. Some of the darker texture looks missing on this left cheek portion. So I'm adding it again using an 8B pencil, and I will blend it later on. Okay, so now it's time to make this area look shiny, and for that I'm adding highlights using an electric eraser. I'm going over all those areas which are lighter and shiny in the reference image very carefully. And make sure to keep the tip of your electric eraser clean and sharp while working on these areas to avoid thick and blurry strokes. Notice that I'm carefully going over the indentation line we added earlier and cleaning the spill of the graphite from them. Keep on relating to the reference image and note the highlighted portions and add the highlights onto your drawing respectively. I only added the indentation lines to help me locate the exact position of these micro highlights later on. The eye portion has some blended highlights. So I'm shifting towards my perfection eraser and picking up the graphite by keeping the pressure very low. And look how beautiful and realistic the area has started to look. I'm going back and forth with my electric eraser and perfection eraser to add brighter and softer highlights where required. Keep on adding the highlights, but make sure to look closely at how this polythene folds and form the wrinkles and how it reflects light. Notice the small changes in light and shadow because this shiny plastic will reflect the light differently. Polythene has wrinkles and irregularities, so you have to keep some sharp lines to make the area look more crisp and realistic. Okay, so moving on to the bottom portion, and I'm starting the outlining process just like I did for the upper portion. As we know that the outline of this drawing has shaded areas along with defined strokes. So I'm using my chisel tip pencil for this purpose. To create a chisel tip, grab your 8B pencil and sharp it to create a long lead like this. Now scrape it onto the scraper or any sandpaper or rough surface to achieve a chisel tip like this. But don't forget to save the powder from the scraper as we can use it for shading later on. And that is how you can use every bit of your pencil and avoid any waste. Keep on analyzing the grid boxes and add the strokes until you have the required outline. Okay, now use that leftover powder and shade this left portion, as this area is relatively darker in the reference image. I'm using my medium-sized draw brush and shading the area which are darker using relatively higher pressure. Now I am switching towards the bigger size draw brush and using lighter pressure to blend the powder on this whole area. I'm again shifting towards the medium sized draw brush to define the contours of this chin portion. And keep on going back and forth until you have achieved the required 3D base. Now as the base is done, it's time to add the blended highlights. And for that, I'm firstly using my perfection eraser. I'm picking up the excessive graphite from the tip of the nose by moving my eraser in small circular motions. As this mouth portion has soft and blended highlights, so I'm kneading my eraser and creating a round tip. And now I am dabbing it over the highlighted portions to pick up the graphite. Now to give the highlights a more softer look, I'm using a tissue paper and going over this whole portion with a very light hand. This will also tone down the highlights and make them even more softer and blended. Okay, so let's add the darker texture, and again I'm using my sharp tip 8B pencil for this purpose. Now to add the contrast and shadows, I'm maintaining the lower angle to avoid harsh strokes. And for the mustache hair, I'm slightly increasing the angle and adding the small strokes side by side. Make sure to keep the length of the strokes random to give it a more natural look, because too much uniformity takes the essence of realism away from the hyper-realistic drawings. When the first layer of hair strokes are done, I'm going over this area and lightly blending it using a bigger size draw brush. Now I'm repeating the similar process of adding thin strokes over and in between the previous ones. And this layering will make some of the hair appear in the back and some in the front, making the area look more 3D and realistic. I'm also shading the lip by using the same 8B pencil and maintaining variable pressure. just like the way I did earlier. Now grab your perfection eraser and start adding the softer base highlights along the darker strokes for this polythene creases and skin texture. I'm going back and forth with my tools and adjusting the tone of highlights and shadows until I achieve the desired results. Okay, so now it's time to add brighter highlights and make this area look super shiny and 3D. And as always, I'm using my sharp tip electric eraser and adding these small yet brighter dots and strokes. I'm applying higher pressure to achieve brighter highlights and then gradually decreasing it for the softer ones. I'm also using the same electric eraser but without turning it on to add softer highlights. And in this way, it will act as a mono zero eraser. This left side of the face is looking a bit dark, so I'm using my perfection and kneaded eraser to add softer base highlights. And some of the lighter texture is still missing, so I'm adding it using my electric eraser very carefully. The highlights on the left portion are a bit different from the previous ones. And for that, I'm adding the mixture of small dots using my round yet sharp tip mono zero eraser. Make sure to keep the size of these dots random, as too much uniformity takes the essence of realism away. Now to make this base highlights more shiny and 3D, I'm using my electric eraser and going over some dots very carefully. And look how realistic the texture has started to look. I'm again using the electric eraser without turning it on to add softer highlights in between the brighter ones. Just like this. Okay, so now moving on to the lips portion, and I'm following the similar process of adding the shadows and darker texture first using an 8B pencil. And blend this layer thoroughly to achieve a smooth base for highlights and lighter texture. Okay, now it's time to add life to these teeth. And firstly, I'm using my mono zero eraser with a sharp tip to define the upper outline of the teeth. And when you have defined the outline, it's time to pick up the excess graphite from the teeth. And I'm using my perfection eraser. I'm using the same perfection eraser to add the base highlights on the mouth portion as well. Now I'm topping the previous highlights with mono zero eraser to add some more dimension to it. And never hesitate to go back and adjust the details until you are fully satisfied with the results. And again, I'm adding some brighter highlights in this mouth portion using my electric eraser. And look how these small highlights make the area look realistic in no time. Moving on to the lower portion, and I'm following the similar detailing and highlighting process as I did earlier. Just keep on relating to the reference image every now and then to make sure you are on the right track. I'm firstly adjusting the darker details using my 8B pencil. And when you are done with the base, start adding softer highlights using perfection eraser. Keep the polythene texture in mind, how it forms creases and highlights, and add these strokes accordingly. I'm also using a kneaded eraser to pick up the graphite along with blending the edges of some of these previous highlights. And when the base highlights are in place, start adding brighter ones using an electric eraser very carefully. Notice that I'm going over and in between the previous highlights to mimic this shiny polythene creases and folds texture. Okay, so some of the highlights are still looking a bit dull to me, so to make them pop up even more, I'm using my jelly roll pen and going over a few of these highlights. This step is optional. I'm adding these small dots and thin strokes very carefully. And look how this small step enhanced the whole look of the drawing. And with this last step, we are done with this hyper-realistic portrait. Creating these free drawing tutorials needs a significant amount of time and energy. So if you found this one valuable, please show your support by liking this video. Your support keeps me inspired to bring you more creative content. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.